Faculty of Economics. Good afternoon. I'm back here with you today to continue with our economics content, for which today we're doing economic pursuits, which is a continuity from last week. I'm Mr. Mhlongo. Today's topics under economic pursuits are indicators, which include both economic and social indicators, as well as industrial development policies. So we've integrated two topics here because of time. And one of these topics is the one that you are writing your essay task based on today, which is industrial development policies. So please join me. Let's see how can we integrate and break down these two main topics under economic pursuit in your paper. Remember, the pursuit topic is a part of our paper one, which will be a part of your section A, which is question 1, section B under question 3, and the half of question 4, as well as question number 6. We will be dealing with 3 essays here in these two topics: for economic indicators, social indicators, as well as South African and overseas regional development. So the following are the lesson objectives that will be achieved during the course of this lesson. After this lesson, you will be able to differentiate or distinguish between economic indicators and the social indicators. The lesson will also equip you to be able to discuss in detail economic indicators. Remember, if ever you are given an opportunity or a question on this type, this will be 8 marks. If you distinguish or briefly discuss, it will be 8 marks also. Or maybe there can be a higher order question here for 10 marks. 10 marks is a part of additional part if ever your essay comes from one of indicators. Discuss in detail economic indicators. This is for 40 marks. Remember, it's an essay, so once we come across in your exam guideline, discuss in detail, that means that's an essay. And then also discuss in detail social indicators, it's an essay also. This will be 40 marks if it comes into your examination. Remember that economic indicators or social indicators can also appear as a data response question where you have to answer out of 10 marks. And then also, you will be able to briefly discuss industrial development policies and strategies. These are 2 things: policies and strategies under industrial development. Two policies, 2 strategies. The lesson will equip you to be able to discuss them. Also, briefly discuss regional development. After this lesson, we will be able to discuss in brief the regional development with its aims or objectives. Discuss in detail South African and overs to regional development. In this case, we are dealing with an essay, so this one will be 40 marks. Discuss in detail South African and overs to regional development. It's an essay that will be discussed also here. Briefly discuss incentive to promote industrial development. This one can either be 8 marks or 10 marks if ever maybe it's a part of a data response or additional part, or it can also be 1 mark or 2 marks up to 4 marks, where you discuss incentives to promote industrial development. And the last one will be briefly discuss the best practice of regional benchmark. Also, these can move from 1 mark up to 10 marks. So in this situation, you can be given a chance to mention any 2 that will give you 2 marks, or identify if it's a data response. It can also be 4 if you have to answer the immediately higher order question. And then also can be 8 if ever you have to briefly discuss 1 of them or 2 of them. That will be 8 marks. And also it can also be 10 marks in case it comes as an additional part to maybe South African and overs to regional or industrial development. So it is believed that you already know the following based on our previous content. Economic growth and development and economic pursuit is well known. South African growth and development policies are also known, have been discussed here. So our listening body, we have indicators as well as regional development. All right. So remember, if we talk about the indicators, we refer to indices that reflect economic and social performance. Now we have to discuss them into, as differentiated or separated. We have economic indicators and social indicators. If we talk about the economic indicators, we refer to the indices or statistical data or information that shows economic performance. Those are economic indicators. And remember that economic indicators can be differentiated into two. We have the pro-cyclic economic indicators and the counter-cyclic economic indicators. The pro-cyclic as well as the counter-cyclic. So we have these two. The pro-cyclic economic indicators are economic indicators that are in proportion to economic performance. If they are in proportion, we mean as the indicator increase, the economy will also increase. As the indicator decrease, the economy will also decrease. They are pro-cyclic. They are in proportion to economic performance. The counter-cyclic, they are not in proportion to economic performance, meaning as the indicator increases, the economy will decrease, or vice versa. So some examples of the pro-cyclic indicators include, we talk about maybe the employment. If ever employment increases, we can come across the increase in economic growth. If productivity increases, we can come across the increase in economic growth. If the money supply increases, we come across the increase in economic growth. And then the counter-cyclic, the situation we talk about maybe the likes of unemployment. If ever unemployment is increasing, we know that the economic growth will be decreasing. That is counter-cyclic. And then also if ever inflation rate increases, that means economic growth might increase. So that also counter-cyclic. It is not in proportion to economic performance. So we'll discuss these indicators, both of them, economic and social, in detail. Remember, if we talk of economic indicators, we refer to indicators related to inflation rate. We talk about indicators related to productivity. We refer to indicators related to money supply, indicators related to employment, indicators related to interest rate, etc. And then under social indicators, we'll be talking about indicators that reflect social performance, or the statistic or data or information that show social performance or wellness of the society. In there, we refer to the likes of demographics, talk about nutrition and health, we talk about housing and urbanization, we talk about health, we talk about education. Those are some indicators. Or we also talk about basic services. Those are social indicators. So whenever there's a change in those indicators, there will also be a change in the social performance, either in a bad or a good way. And then we'll move to regional development. In this situation, we will start by explaining briefly the industrial development, which is known to be strategies or policies initiated to improve existing industries or expansion of existing industries, and also encourage establishment of new industries. And then we'll talk about the policies, two policies and two strategies of regional development or industrial development. From then we'll talk about regional development aims or objectives. And then we'll move straight to South African handovers to regional development, which talks about industrial development zones, special economic zones, special development initiatives, as well as corridors. We'll also check incentives used by the government in South Africa to promote industrial development. We'll then look at best practices of regional benchmark. That will be the end of our lesson. So here we explain indicators. So indicators refer to the statistic or data that measure the behavior of the economy as well as the well-being of the country's citizens. So in this situation, we focus on both economic and social indicators. If it measures economy, that means that's economic indicator. If it measures the welfare or the well-being of the country's citizens, that's a social indicator. So we are dealing with both of them here. So indicators are used by government and economists to discover trends and performance of economic and social variables. So indicators are very important in the economy or in the country because they give the government the layout of the performance of the economy and also the wellness of the society. If ever in the economy we come across a situation whereby there's a high level of inflation, high interest rate at the same time, we have an issue of high level of unemployment, an issue of less money supply, that tells the government that there must be a quick intervention, because without intervening, the economy will find itself being even dire, also facing the issue of stagflation. So indicators are given that claims or highlights to the government on what can be done after noticing that the trends of economic performance. And then we talk about the social indicators. If ever there are some changes in the social indicators, like we come across the decrease in life expectancy for population of the country, that means the state must intervene by trying to ensure that people have access to proper healthcare and basic needs so that they can live longer. We also talk about situation whereby maybe there's a decrease in enrollment rate in the secondary schools. That means our secondary schools are not doing well. There will be a high level of unskilled people in the near future. If there's a decline in provision of basic services, so that is very important also as an indicator, because if ever basic services such as water supply, electricity, housing, also we talk about sanitation, if those services are not provided to the society, that means the welfare of the nation has been compromised. And then also, if ever there's an influx of people from rural areas to urban areas, which is now known as urbanization, that will mean there's a problem, because that means there's a lower development in rural communities and more development in big cities, which lead to people migrating or moving from rural areas to urban areas. So indicators are very important for the government so that there can be a certain intervention in order to prevent a particular incidents from happening. Also, they are very important also for international organizations, because for the country to get help through funding, maybe from IMF, International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, as well as United Nations, these organizations must be able to obtain South African social indicators so that they will be able to intervene. Also, for the country to be easily compared internationally with other world countries, indicators are very important because they give the government, they give those organizations the way in which the country is doing. Then there can be a better comparison using the changes in indicators over a period of time. Economic indicators can be, are pro-cyclic, while some are counter-cyclic. Remember, that has been mentioned before. So pro-cyclic indicators are indicators that in direct proportion to economic performance, such as GDP. If ever GDP or real GDP increases, there will be economic growth increasing. And then counter-cyclic indicators are not in direct proportion to economic performance, such as unemployment. If ever unemployment is increasing, we expect economic growth to decline, so it is not in proportion. Economic indicators are statistics or data that indicate the performance of economic variables over a period of time. Can be statistics or data or information used to indicate or to measure the performance of economic activities over a period of time. Economic indicators are used by economists as barometers to determine whether economic growth and development have increased or decreased over a period of time. So they are very important because they show if we have experienced increase or decrease of over economic activities. The change in economic indicators has a huge impact on government's decision-making when planning main budget. Yes, remember when the government plan its main budget, it focuses on these indicators. It is very important for the government to ensure that the wellness of the people is taken care of. It is very important for the government to ensure that the economy is doing well. Economic variables are improving over a period of time. So these indicators are very much instrumental for the state whenever it is planning its own main budget. Money will be allocated based on the performance of indicators. For instance, if there is high level of unemployment in the country or in the economy, that means the state must allocate more money for job creation in the economy. If ever there is the poor level of education, or there is lower level of entrance, maybe in higher institutions for education, that means the state must intervene by planning and allocate more money for, in budget for higher education. So those are things that are very important that will help the government on in order to ensure that there is a better economic performance and social performance. Economic indicators also have an influence on how state implements economic policies. Remember that the state have also to intervene by implementing some economic policies. So if ever indicators are not available, it will be difficult for the state to have proper policies being implemented or being in place. So having proper economic policies in place, that will mean the government have obtained information on the performance of both economic and social indicators. So here we have indicators related to inflation or inflation indicators, foreign trade indicators, employment indicators, productivity indicators, interest rate indicators, and money supply indicators. So in this situation, we talk about, remember we define inflation as a significant increase in general price level over a period of time. And then indicators related to inflation include, firstly, let's start with the last one, the GDP deflator. It's one of the indicators here, where nominal GDP figures are converted to real GDP figures in order to focus the economy. And then also we talk about CPI indicators, the consumer price index. And then we talk about the PPI indicators, which is the producer price index. These are main indicators that are discussed under inflation indicators. And then under the foreign trade indicators, we were concerned with the exchange rate, as well as the terms of trade. These are indicators related to what we call the foreign trade. Under employment indicators, we talk about economically active population, which are people aged from 16 to 65. And then we also talk about the labor force participation rate. And then also we refer to the unemployment. These are indicators related to employment. Productivity indicators. In this case, we talk about labor productivity. And then we refer to also remuneration per worker. These are indicators that will be discussed based on productivity. And then also the interest rate indicators. We define interest rate, we define, we start working on the repo rate, the prime rate, the nominal interest rate, and then the real interest rate. These are indicators related to interest rate. Also the money supply. In this situation, we refer to the following: M1, M2, and M3. These are the indicators related to the money supply. So the following will be discussing these indicators. Remember, these can come as a part of the essay mostly, where you discuss in detail economic indicators. So inflation rate indicators. So in definition, we say inflation is a significant increase in the general price level or sustained increase in general price level over a period of time. We know that whenever inflation increases, it decreases the buying power of money or the purchasing power parity of money. While whenever inflation is decreasing, it increases the buying power parity of money. So remember that inflation in South Africa is controlled by South African Reserve Bank. It is responsible to ensure that prices do not increase or decrease below or beyond limits. Remember, our limits are inflation target rate, which is between 3 to 6%. So inflation rate is measured through the consumer price index, which is CPI, as well as the producer price index, which is PPI. Remember, the CPI measures the cost of living for consumers. It consists of the consumer goods and services, consists of value-added tax, consists of interest rate, does not include intermediate goods, does not include also capital goods. And then the prices of imported consumer goods are explicitly shown in this situation. So the consumer price index, so CPI is a weighted average of prices of general basket of consumer goods and services likely to be bought by consumers. So we say normally it measures the basket for consumer goods and services over a period of time, for average South Africans over a period of time. It is calculated monthly and measures headline inflation. So the CPI is calculated monthly and published monthly to measure the effect of the headline inflation. Remember, the headline inflation is also known as the CPI inflation, which is the inflation that has not been adjusted. And then it shows changes in the general purchasing power of the rand and is used for inflation targeting. So the CPI is the one that is used to ensure that inflation does not increase or decrease below the limit. From time to time, countries adjust the weighting of basket of goods and, to reflect current buying trends of the population. In South Africa, the government also compiled the CPI that exclude the mortgage bonds or loans, which is CPIX. Remember, CPIX refers to the inflation figures or inflation that does not include mortgage bond or interest rate. We continue with inflation rate indicators. We talk about the producer price index. Remember, producer price index measures the cost of production by businesses. It consists of cost of inputs by businesses. The PPI measures the cost of production by businesses, like I've mentioned. The PPI includes the capital goods and intermediate goods, but not services. So services are not a part of the PPI basket, but the consumer goods and capital goods are the part of the PPI basket. Remember that the price of imported capital goods and intermediate goods are explicitly shown in this basket. We exclude the likes of interest rate, the taxes are not the part of the producer price index. It excludes VAT and interest rate. PPI serves as an indicator to predict consumer inflation because the increase in the cost of production results to increase in the consumer prices. We know that if ever the production cost is increasing, consumers will find themselves more vulnerable in future because the consumer goods will also be expensive. So in this situation, PPI is very important, or is one of the important indicators for inflation, because it simply predicts if there will be a change in the consumer price index or not in the near future. And then we talk about the foreign trade indicators. Remember, foreign trade refers to the exchange of goods and services between world countries across the world. So foreign trade can be described as the exchange of goods and services between two or more countries. The foreign trade indicators measure the country's competitiveness in the foreign market. So if ever these indicators are doing very well, that means the country is more competitive in the global market. If ever the country's economy is not doing well abroad, that will mean these indicators are also doing bad. Foreign trade indicators include the exchange rate as well as terms of trade. Remember, the exchange rate is the value of one country's currency in relation or compared to another country's currency, while terms of trade refers to the index of export prices to the index of import prices. And then exchange rate. Exchange rate can be defined as the value of one country's currency in relation to another country's currency. So in this situation, you talk about when you compare South African rand maybe to the dollar, then you're creating the exchange rate in there. Exchange rate means a price at which different currencies can be exchanged. So it's a value, like I've mentioned. Two methods are used when calculating exchange rate, namely direct and indirect. So we have direct approach or indirect approach. Then we continue the exchange rate. Changes in exchange rate affect the prices that are paid for imports and the prices that are paid for exports. So, for instance, whenever the exchange rate appreciates, that means exports will be expensive, so there will be more earnings on exported goods and services. But if it depreciates, there will be less earnings on exported goods and services. When the rand depreciates, export becomes cheaper, which increases the foreign demand for local produced goods and services. Import becomes expensive, which decreases the local demand. So as the currency appreciates, as the currency depreciates, that will mean our goods that are sold abroad will be relatively cheap, they will be affordable. While the goods that are sold locally from abroad will be expensive, because if our rand appreciates against the dollar will be depreciating. If the rand depreciates against the dollar will be appreciating. We continue the exchange rate. When the rand appreciates, exports become expensive, which decreases the foreign demand. Imports become cheaper, which increases the local demand. So as our rand appreciates, what will happen? The exports will become relatively expensive, which can lead to foreign consumers not demanding the locally produced goods because they will be expensive for them, depending if those goods are relatively elastic or not. So they will be expensive. But then if our goods are not elastic, that will mean the demand for our local goods abroad will remain high, and there will be more money received from abroad as payment for those goods and services. So depreciated, the exports will become, the imports will become expensive. What does that mean? As imports become expensive, local consumers will demand less of imported goods because they are relatively cheap. So keep that in your mind as you link with the foreign trade topic. The appreciation will mean our exports will be expensive, imports will be cheap. The depreciation vice versa. That means exports will be cheap and then imports will be expensive. So in the situation, as exports are becoming cheap, there will be more demand for local goods abroad, which can even improve the BOP deficit because more goods will be flowing out and more income will be received for those goods and services. Exchange rate is a very important foreign trade indicator as it influences the inflow of imports and outflow of exports. Yes, it ensures that goods are coming in large numbers or less, or we export more or less. Appreciated exchange rate weaken the country's balance of payment, while depreciated exchange rate strengthen the country's balance of payment. So let me explain to this one, how does it happen? If ever the currency or exchange rate appreciates, what will happen? That means our export will be expensive. Then if our goods that we are selling abroad are relatively elastic, that will mean they will be replaced easily abroad, then there will be lower demand for local goods abroad, which will lead to what? It will simply lead to a less income earned as a foreign currency from other world countries because our goods has become expensive. But then it can also be a good thing because as the currency appreciate, if our goods are not elastic, that will mean there will be more income earned from those goods and services, which will be improving our terms of trade as well as the balance of payment. And then whenever the currency depreciates, it becomes weak, there will be more demand for local goods abroad. Then there will be more outflow of goods to foreign countries because they will be cheap. And then local goods will be, there will be more demand. Let's say the currency does what? It depreciates. As the currency depreciates, what happens? Our goods will be cheap. So as our goods are becoming cheap, they will be demanded more abroad. So that means the depreciation will mean the demand for goods or demand for exports will be increasing because goods are affordable, and then the demand for imports will be decreasing because as our rand depreciate, their currency appreciate, meaning our imports, the imports will be, exports will be cheap, imports will be expensive, then we demand less of them. So if we demand less imports while they're demanding more exports, that will mean now we can be favored because more goods will be flowing out and less goods will be coming in since they will be expensive. However, that can also result to less money flowing into the country, and that will decrease our terms of trade. So as our terms of trade are decreasing, then less income is received by the country. So remember, the balance of payment will be affected by the foreign currency coming in or going out. If ever goods are too cheap that are exported abroad, there will be less foreign currency coming into the South African economy, which will be bad, cannot reduce our current account deficit. So this goes a long way. One answer can be correct and be wrong depending. And then the terms of trade. Remember, terms of trade refer to the index of export prices to the index of import prices. In this situation, we compare the prices of exports and the price of imports. If ever the prices of exports are increasing faster than the price of import, that means terms of trade are likely to increase. There will be more money earned from the foreign countries due to the fact that our goods are relatively expensive or competitive. However, that can only be for the short run, because if ever then we face the issue of goods becoming expensive while they can easily be replaced or substituted abroad, that will mean there will be less demand for local goods abroad due to the fact that they can be replaced by other goods produced in other countries. Changes in export and import prices has an influence over terms of trade. Yes, if ever export prices are increasing, there will be more terms of trade, but only in the short run if goods are relatively elastic. And then if ever, let's say import prices are increasing faster than export prices, that means our terms of trade will be declining as a country. Then that will mean less income will be received and income that will be flowing out. Remember, the income that we earn from abroad as a payment for export will be used to pay for import that we buy from other countries. So if ever then we have an issue of the income that is being earned on export is lesser than the money that is paid out, that means we have an issue because the money we earn cannot afford to pay for all imported goods and services as a country. So the increase in export prices has a temporary increase in increasing effect in terms of trade because demand for export is likely to increase in the long run. So changes in terms of trade may spill over to the balance of payment. If terms of trade decrease, it may cause a deficit. Remember, as terms of trade are decreasing, that will mean there is less income received by South Africa in a form of the balance of payment. That will mean then less income is flowing in, more income is going out. That will cause further the balance of payment deficit in the BOP account. And then remember, we have these two indicators under foreign trade, which is the exchange rate as well as the terms of trade. For exchange rate, we look at the the appreciation and the depreciation of the currency. What is the impact of that? If ever the currency appreciates, exports become expensive and competitive abroad, which will mean there can be more money received or earned from export. However, that can also have a negative impact, because as exports are becoming expensive, imports are becoming cheap. So there will be less demand for South African goods abroad and more demand for foreign goods in South Africa, which will affect our economy negative, because even the BOP will find itself facing the more inflow of import than the outflow of exports. And then also, when we talk about the depreciation of the currency, we mean our currency is losing the value. So that means our goods are becoming relatively affordable abroad. And then what happens? Their goods are becoming cheap in South Africa. What is bad about the currency depreciating? Local goods that are sold abroad can be too cheap, to the point that local firms can even be demotivated to sell their goods abroad, because they are not earning enough money due to the fact that the currency is too weak compared to the foreign currencies. So that's one of the bad things also. And then in terms of trade, like I mentioned, the index of export prices to the index of import prices. So if ever export prices are increasing faster than import prices, that will mean we will be experiencing a high level of terms of trade in the short run, especially if our exported goods are relatively inelastic. They cannot easily be replaced abroad. That will lead to more income earned by South Africa, which will be improving our BOP and reduce the deficit. So employment indicators. So employment indicators include economical active population, which is EAP. Remember, these are people aged between 16 to 65, and then employment rate and unemployment rate. These are indicators related to what we call the employment. And then economical active population, which is also a part of labor force. So refer to individual age between 15 to 64. One can say 16 to 65 who are willing and able to work. So those people are regarded to be economically active. Economically active population is also known as labor force. And then we continue with the EAP. EAP include individuals who are employed in both formal sector, informal sector, also people that are self-employed, and also unemployed people who are actively looking for a job, but they cannot find those job opportunities. So economically active population include those people. It should be people employed by formal sector, people employed by informal sector, also people that are self-employed, also people that are not employed but they are actively looking for a job, and they're also active. I mean, they are economically active. They are willing to work, but they are unable to find that work. So those people are the part of economically active population. So the employment rate. Employment rate refers to the number of employed persons expressed as a percentage of economically active population. So in this situation, we check the number of people that are employed, and then we divide them by economically active population, then we multiply by 100 to get the employment rate. And then employment rate data is used to determine the following. So what is the importance of this data? Labor productivity. So we are able to discover how much could be the labor productivity of the country looking at the employment rate. And then also employment rate is the difference, I mean, in different sectors, so which is with the structural changes. And then also income per worker, we have to check how much is earned per worker or per individual or per employee. And then other important employment indicators are employment by occupation, employment by gender, by population, and by the profits. So that's when we get information across the country to say how much of this gender is employed, how much of this gender is unemployed, and then by population, and also taking the what we call the ethnic group, and then also checking the province that is employing more or less people. So you can come across that data if it's data response under your indicators. Then employment rate is calculated as follows. We say employment rate equals number of people employed divided by economically active population multiplied by 100, then we discover the employment rate. We continue unemployment rate. So in this situation, you refer to all economically active population or persons that have been looking for a job, but they cannot find one. Those are people that are active looking for a job. They are economically active, but they cannot find job. Those people are the part of the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate can be divided into narrow and expanded. Remember, we have a narrow unemployment according to grade 10 content, as well as expanded unemployment rate. If we talk about the narrow unemployment rate, we refer to we exclude people that have given up on looking for a job. We exclude those people. They are economically active, but they are no longer looking for a job because maybe it's been long, they are not finding a job. So we don't include them. But under expanded, we include those people that are economically active, but even though they are no longer looking for a job, those people are included under expanded unemployment. Narrow unemployment exclude EAP that has given up on looking for a job. like I've mentioned before, and then expanded will include them. So expanded unemployment include EAP, or economically active population, that has given up on looking for jobs. So we include them that have, that are no longer looking for jobs because of their situations, but they are economically active. They are also added. So that's why the narrow unemployment will always be lower than the expanded unemployment rate. Expanded will always be higher than the narrow unemployment rate, because the narrow, what does it do? It excludes a certain group of people under labor force, while expanded include everyone. So the unemployment rate equals to, we say, is number of people unemployed divided by economically active population multiplied by 100. So 3 methods are used to calculate unemployment. They include the census system, surveys, and registration under the Department of Labor website. Productivity indicators. Remember that productivity is the ratio between inputs and output. That's when we check how much did our inputs generate in terms of output. So indicators related to productivity include labor productivity as well as remuneration per worker. Remember, if we talk about the labor productivity, we're all about the total amount of productivity or goods produced by each employee or worker in the organization. So productivity equals to output divided by factor input. So productivity will increase if input decline and productivity stays the same. So we will come across increase in productivity. If input stay constant but production process increase, then productivity will increase. Inputs decline and production increase, then we have the increase in productivity. We continue. The labor productivity. Labor productivity is output per unit of labor. So we say output divided by labor input. So number of workers, we say total output or real GDP divided by what? Divided by what we call the labor input or number of workers employed within that particular business. Then we come across labor productivity. So labor productivity index are published by the National Productivity Institute, NPI, in South Africa. Labor productivity will increase if output per worker increases in the given period of time. So if ever workers are producing more goods and services, that's an output per worker. If ever it's increasing, then we can see the increase in labor productivity. Labor productivity can be expressed in a volume in terms of, volume terms or monetary terms. So the output per worker, total output divided by total employment. So if we want to get output per worker, we say total output or real GDP for the business divided by the total number of people employed or total number of workers or employees. We have real GDP per worker. We continue. Remuneration per worker. Here we talk about the income earned by each employee within the organization. The ratio between the increase in wages and the increase in productivity is an important indicator. So remember, it is very important for organization to know the following. If ever remuneration per worker increases faster than the productivity per worker, that will mean we will come across a situation of inflation, because now workers are paid more than what they can produce. So that does not benefit the business. So the business will offset the burden cost of production to the consumer. That will be inflation. An increase in the unit labor cost will result to the reduction of profitability. So if ever the labor cost is increasing for the organization or business, the firms will become less profitable. And then if the increase in real wages is greater than the increase in productivity, we come across inflation because workers are being paid more money, but they are producing relatively less goods and services. And then increased productivity is required for a country to compete globally. So it is very important for the country to increase its productivity so that it can be more competitive in the global market. Interest rate indicators. In this case, we refer to different types of interest rates. So interest rate refer to the price of borrowing and lending. The main factor used to determine interest rate is repo rate. Remember, repo rate is the main type of interest rate that is used to influence other types of interest rate. Changes in the interest rate has an effect on credit creation in the economy. So whenever, remember, the interest rate is changing, the economy, the credit creation in the economy will be affected either negative or positive. With more interest rate, that will mean people will be borrowing less money within the economy. So credit creation will be affected. High interest rate make credit become more expensive and less affordable. Then people decide not to take loans. And then interest rate is a financial indicator used to indicate the price expressed as a percentage per year to be paid for funds invested, lent, or borrowed. The government uses interest rate to encourage savings and curb or encourage spending. So the government ensures that to deal with the high excessive spending by consumers, interest rate will be increased so that consumers will borrow less money and spend less on goods and services. To encourage the spending, the government can intervene, or Reserve Bank can intervene by doing what? By lowering the repo rate so that there will be more credit creation and spending. Lower interest rate will increase borrowings and spending, which occurs in financial markets. Remember, everything about this will occur in financial markets. And then short-term borrowings take place in money markets, while long-term borrowings take place in the under capital market. Remember that one, under our markets in the circular flow. So we have a repo rate, which is the interest rate charged by charged by central bank to commercial banks on their borrowings. South African Reserve Bank will impose a repo rate to commercial bank whenever they borrow money from it. Then when the South African Reserve Bank increases repo rate, commercial bank must increase their flexible interest rate that include what we call the nominal interest rate, as well as the prime rate also will be affected. When South African Reserve Bank decreases repo rate, commercial banks must also decrease their flexible interest rate. So whenever interest rate or repo rate has been lowered by Reserve Bank, commercial bank must also lower their interest rate, the nominal interest rate. So this is the rate charged by banks when lending to borrowers. Whenever people are borrowing money from commercial banks, they are charged what we call the nominal interest rate. Nominal interest rate is unadjusted. It changes with the repo rate and inflation. It is not stable like the real interest rate. This one changes with the inflation and also changes with the change in the repo rate. Real interest rate. So real interest rate is this one has been adjusted, does not have an inflation effect, does not change with the inflation. The prime interest rate. So prime interest rate is a lower rate charged by commercial bank to their best clients whenever lending or borrowing. So this one is known as the prime rate or prime interest rate. Then money supply indicators. But before we go further, remember under interest rate, we talk about 4 indicators: repo rate indicators, prime rate indicators, nominal interest rate, as well as the real interest rate. Remember that nominal interest rate has not been adjusted, while real interest rate has been adjusted for inflation. Remember, money supply is the total stock of money or circulation of money in the economy. Money supply is informed by changes in monetary policy and fiscal policy. Whenever the monetary policy has been implemented, expansionary, there will be more money supply. If it's implemented restrictionary, there will be less money supply. Same thing applies with the fiscal policy. If ever the government intervened by expanding monetary policy through expansionary, there will be more money supply. But if ever it's becoming more restrictive, there will be less money supply. Central bank plays a major role in controlling money supply in circulation through monetary policy instruments. So the Reserve Bank is using monetary policy instrument to control the money supply in the economy. Mainly, interest rate is the main tool used by Reserve Bank. Increased money supply results to more money chasing few goods and services in the economy, which has an inflation effect. Remember this one, we spoke about this one under smoothing business cycle, where we said whenever the economy is at peak, there will be more money available because people are employed, and there will be greater demand, which will be increasing excess demand and cause inflation because the demand will be increasing faster than in the supply. Stabilizing money supply is one of the main objectives for South African Reserve Bank. So Reserve Bank is responsible to stabilize money supply in the economy using these monetary policy instruments or measures. Money supply is classified in 3 categories, namely M1, which refers to banknotes and coins in circulation and demand deposit for the domestic private sector. M2 equal to M1. So we carry on this one, M1 plus other short-term and medium-term deposits by the domestic private sector. And then M3 equals to M2 plus long-term deposits of the domestic private sector. So these are the indicators related to money supply. We have M1, M2, M3. Remember, the increase in money supply and circulation will lead to greater demand for goods and services, which will cause what we call the inflation, which is also one of the objectives for the South African Reserve Bank to ensure it does not increase beyond 6%. And then also, if ever money supply decreases, that will mean there will be less money available in circulation, which will lead to less demand for goods and services. Then we move to social indicators. Remember, we said these are indicators that measure social performance. We talk about demographics, nutrition, health, education, services, housing, and urbanization. Those are indicators. So under social indicators, we say is a statistic or data that measure the level of social development and human welfare in a country. Those are social indicators. The improvement of social indicators shows welfare of the society and improvement of social performance. If ever these social indicators are improving, that will mean the society is doing extremely well. So that will mean people are living under better conditions. Demographics indicators. So demographics can be described as the study of population relating to elements such as population size, population changes over time, age, gender, distribution, as well as geographical distribution. So if we talk of demographics, we refer to indicators related to the change in population size of the country that goes together with life expectancy. Population growth rate, this one refers to annual percentage change in population. So as the percentage change in population maybe might increase drastically, that will mean we have an issue with demographic indicators. Data on size of population and the expected growth rate is important for the service delivery. So it is very important for the government to obtain correct information about the change in population in specific areas, because without having that information, there will be poor service delivery. So service can be properly delivered if ever the data sent to the government is correct and adequate. Information is obtained from national census and media population estimates. So the information based on population growth rate can be found under census as well as media population estimates. We continue. Projections are used by government to plan a resource regarding infrastructure, education, health, and other services. So the government uses projections in order to be able to provide these services, because it does not have the proper information due to the fact that people change now and then as they leave maybe from rural areas to urban areas. So the population size can change or can increase or decrease, it depends. Calculation of population growth rate considers birth and death rates as well as data on immigration and immigration. We continue. Life expectancy. Remember, we said life expectancy refers to the number of years a person is expected to live from birth to death. And then also, it expresses number of years a newborn or infant will live if the prevailing patterns of mortality remain the same throughout his or her life. So reflect living conditions such as diet, access to healthcare services, education, economic and employment. These the life expectancy reflect all of those things, because the better life expectancy means someone maybe have access to proper healthcare facilities, have income to maintain him or herself. So the level of income has an impact over life expectancy for people. Life expectancy at birth in South Africa has decreased over the past few years compared to the middle income countries, caused by chronic diseases such as HIV and AIDS. Health indicators. So in this case, we talk about indicators that reflect the well-being of citizens. It gives the strength to be productive citizens in the economy. If ever people have access to proper healthcare, they become productive citizens. So healthcare indicators are very important because they have an influence over high labor productivity or lower labor productivity. Health and nutrition indicators include the following. Infant mortality. Remember, infant mortality refers to children that die before reaching 1 year old or 1 year age. That's an infant mortality rate. Number of children less than 1 year old who die per thousand of live births. Very high in South Africa compared to other world countries. So in South Africa, we are faced by the issue of high level of infant mortality, under 5 mortality rate. In this situation, we are referring to children that die before reaching 5 years. So this might be caused by the likes of malnutrition and other diseases. And then access to health services. This one also is important, because if ever people cannot access healthcare services, that will mean their life expectancy will be dropping. So the part of the population that has access to basic medical services within the walking traveling distance of one hour. So in this situation, we mean people, we refer to people that have access to proper healthcare services in the walking distance of 1 hour, not beyond that. That can mean that those people are improving. South Africa compares well in terms of this indicator or these indicators measuring access to primary healthcare services. Remember, South Africa is one of the countries in the world, in Africa, that is believed to be having superior healthcare facilities. So it is one of those countries with better healthcare facilities, because we come across most of African countries, people coming to South Africa just to get proper healthcare under public hospitals. Standard of healthcare in South Africa is considered to be the best in Africa. Then we also talk about health expenditure. In this situation, we refer to the, what we call it, the percentage of GDP spent on healthcare expenditure. So the government expenditure on the healthcare services as a percentage of GDP. We refer to how much percentage does the government spend in its GDP spending on healthcare expenditure. So access to clean water also is an indicator. So the percentage of population or people in the country reasonable access to clean and purified water. So access to sanitation in this situation refer to population that has a sufficient access to sanitation to prevent human, animal, and insect contact. So these are some of the health indicators. And then we talk about the nutrition indicators. Under nutrition indicators, we refer to the malnutrition, which is all about the children's diet whenever they are not well fed. That can lead to malnutrition. Malnutrition contributes towards to the child mortality rate. So it can lead to the death of children at the early age. That's an effect of malnutrition. Whenever children are not well fed, that can be a part of malnutrition to those children. One of the most important indicators is the number of new cases of severe malnutrition in a child under 5 years. Expressing two weights, we have weight for age or underweight. This indicator, this is indicated by the child being found to weight less than less than 60% estimated weight for age. Remember that children are expected to weight at a certain scale at a particular age. If ever a child is weight below 60% as for the expected weight range, that means that is known to what we call the malnutrition. And then also a height for age, which is known as the dwarfism. In this situation, under healthcare facilities, they check the height of a child must be equivalent or must be in line with the age of a child. Otherwise, that can be regarded to what we call the dwarfism. So overweight children or obesity. So if we talk about obesity, we refer to children that are overweight compared to their age group of the particular age. So in the situation, there is a link between obesity and in childhood and high prevalence of diabetes, respiratory diseases, high blood pressure, and psychological disorders. So if ever children at the early age are faced by obesity, that will mean those children will find themselves affected negatively even in future, because illnesses will be attracted, such as diabetes will be attracted to them because of being overweight. Being overweight can lead to adverse healthcare conditions which affect people's ability to work and take care of themselves. So if ever people are overweight, that's a bad thing, because they might find it difficult for themselves to work. So that part of obesity. So also it results to more illnesses being attracted by that high level of weight. That will be resulting to people even getting those chronic diseases such as diabetes. Education indicators. So in this situation, we talk about the percentage of people or of pupils that have enrolled either in primary education, secondary, or a high level of education. A high level of education is required for long-term economic growth and is key to a country's development and prosperity. So we know that education is very important to the population of the country, because it leads to people to obtain skills and become more marketable, so that they become productive citizens. But if people of the nation are not educated, they become less productive and more inefficient, which will affect what we call the productivity in a bad way. That's why it's very important for you to know to link the relationship between education indicators and productivity indicators. Education is crucial to improve skills and standards of living for country's citizens. How so? If ever people are educated, they are easily employable and marketable, so that can lead to them earning income and live better living standard. Educated nations is marketable, creative, innovative, and productive. So if ever the nation is educated, those people become marketable, they can be employed easily. They are creative, they always think bigger and create new things. They are innovative, they are also productive citizens because of high level of education. Skilled labor force promotes high level of production, thereby increasing economic growth. So if ever the labor force is well trained or skilled, those people will be producing more goods and services because they are less inefficient, but they are mostly efficient. That can lead to economic growth. Investment in education is a long-term social development which has massive impact into the country's economy. We know that South African government spend most of income on the budget through the education system. Most of income is spent in education because it is willing to ensure that most people or all people are becoming marketable and employable. They obtain skills so that they can even rescue the government. Education received the largest portion or component of the 2021-22 main budget. But then, even though this year, even though we talk about 2021-2022, even this current year, education has received the larger amount because the government believe that there must be more investment in education for people to be marketable, for the country to be even productive, and also to be competitive internationally. People must be skilled. People must be trained enough so that they will be able to take the country into the global map with the productivity and also being created or innovative. Indicators related to education include the primary completion ratio, which talks about pupils at the relevant age that are able to complete the primary schooling education. And then also secondary enrollment percentage. In this situation, we refer to percentage of children of the appropriate age attending secondary schools. Remember, there's an age range that allows learners to be at school. So if you are beyond a certain age, you must not be at a certain grade or a certain school because of the age group. And then also, more than 90% of potential school children are in school far more than found in other developing countries. So that means in South Africa, education is so open to everyone in both the primary schooling and secondary schooling because government intervened to provide free public education to everyone in order to try to reduce economic inequalities. So it is a very important indicator. It measures measures the level of education in the country based on the primary enrollment, secondary enrollment, as well as the youth literacy. So under youth literacy rate, we talk about people at the relevant age from 12 to 24 age group that are literate. We are talking about people that are able to read and write. The youth literacy rate serves as an indication of the outcome of education system. So if the youth is well educated, that means in that particular nation, that nation is better off because those people will be marketable, employable. They will be able to establish their own businesses because of the skill they obtain. Public expenditure percentage. In this situation, we refer to the percentage of GDP that is spent or allocated in education under the main budget. So the percentage of public expenditure on education, we know that education receives most highest portion in terms of allocation in the main budget. So South Africa has one of the highest rates of public investment in education in the world. So most of income is spent in education to invest to ensure that people are becoming equipped and employable. And then services indicators. So in this situation, we know that the nation depends on government for the provision of public services. So if the state cannot provide some basic services, people will find themselves living under severe bad conditions and even under severe poverty. So the efficient provision of public services improves standard of living and economic development of the country. So it is very important for the state to intervene to provide public services to people, especially we talk about local municipalities or local authorities providing those basic services such as electricity, water, sanitation, ensuring that people have access to those basic facilities because those services or facilities are important for the welfare of the nation. If people are not having the proper housing or shelter, those people are living under bad economic conditions or social conditions. If people are finding themselves without running water that is purified and clean, that will mean that those people are living under bad conditions. If people are not having electricity, that means those people are living standard is highly compromised by local governments as well as national and also provincial governments. Those services must be made available adequately because it determines the welfare of people, also the standard of living of people, also even the life expectancy is determined. Indicators relating to services include the likes of refuse removal, remember, and sanitation. It is very important for the state to intervene, especially in cities, to ensure that refuse removal programs are in place so that the environment will be kept neat and people will not be affected by illnesses. And then more than half of households in South Africa have access to refuse removal by local government services or dumping sites excluding rural communities. We know that mainly in urban areas we come across these being in place, the refuse removal and sanitation. It is there, it is clean and there. But then in rural areas, the rural areas are being undermined because firstly, for the sanitation to be there, we must have the clean running water. If there's no running water, then sanitation will be compromised. Refuse removal also is compromised in those areas. The percentage of households with access to sanitation has increased over the past years in South Africa because of the improvement of service delivery. Water supply. So in this situation, we refer to the percentage of people or population that have access to clean and running water. So according to 2018 State SA information, about 89% of South African people had access to clean and running water. However, remember, in rural communities, they are still compromised because they are not yet having the pipe and running water. Normally, they use water tanks or they use rivers to get water if ever the government does not intervene locally to provide them with water. So that's one of the challenges. This is average of percentage of people in urban areas and rural areas who can access clean and running water. Improved water resources refer to an adequate amount of water from sources such as household connection, taps inside the yard, public taps, boreholes, protected springs, and rainwater collection. So that will mean if such is available, that will mean then there's an improved water supply in the country, in a country or province or local municipality. Every household is also entitled to 6,000 liters of water for free in a monthly basis. So for those who buy water, because water is for sale according to the government, so they receive 6,000 liters free of charge in a monthly basis. So water is highly subsidized by the government. And then electricity, we talk about electricity supply here. Percentage of household connected to the mains electricity supply also increased to 84.7% in South Africa according to NERSA. So in this situation, we refer to the population that have access to electricity in the country. So South Africans pay relatively low prices since Eskom is a state-owned entity. However, we have seen the increase in prices for the electricity over the past few months. So that has led to people having to pay more tariffs as they use electricity, and that has discouraged people from paying for electricity, because those that are earning stable income find themselves spending most of on buying electricity, which results to them compromising basic needs. So people find themselves also being involved in illegal connections because of such situations. So be aware as a candidate that if ever you come across the question, maybe can be the higher order to say, how does the increase in electricity prices affect the welfare of the nation? So you have to focus basically on people that are underprivileged, that are not earning any income, or that are earning basic or stable income that cannot increase, such as social transfers. Those people become highly vulnerable if there's an increase in what we call electricity tariffs, because of the fact that most of their income, instead of spending 18 necessities, it will be spent on buying electricity, which will lead to them being trapped under poverty for the long term. However, if ever the state then intervene by providing them with subsidies on electricity, that will be reducing burden on them. So how do they accommodate themselves? Those people, they get to be involved in illegal connections. So that's a bad thing for the nation. People must pay for electricity and water as required. The free basic electricity program has been implemented, whereby people earning below certain income bracket receive the prescribed allocation of 50 kilowatts per month. We have seen that it is happening in some areas. In some areas, it doesn't happen. Remember, we have an issue of subsidies and non-subsidies. We also have an issue of price discrimination under public sector as they sell public goods. Some people are on the higher tariff, some are on the medium, some are on the lower tariff in the same local municipality. Every household is also entitled to 6,000 liters of water, like I mentioned this before. Housing and urbanization. So in this situation, we refer to the housing. So we have a percentage of people that are having access to free housing by the government that are under the program of RTP. Significant portion of South Africans are poor and cannot afford to buy themselves the proper or residential houses. So in that case, government must intervene to ensure that those people that are vulnerable, that are in need, that cannot even work, those people can be able to get or access houses from the government, which can be free of charge, no payments. More than 3 million houses, subsidized houses have been handed over since 1994. Even that are free of charge to people that are part of RTP program have been given to people that are deserving to get them. Number of houses completed is a very important indicator of service delivery to the disadvantaged, because it checks how much is the government committed to support those people that do not have shelter in those communities. Urbanization, remember, this one is a movement of people from rural areas to urban areas. Remember that people will be moving from rural areas to urban areas for different opportunities. They move from rural areas because there are better opportunities in big cities. They move because there's a lower level of development in in what we call in rural areas. So for that sake, you come across situations whereby urban areas or big cities are overpopulated due to the fact that there's an issue of urbanization. And how does that affect service delivery? The urbanization will lead to local governments not being fully informed about the number of people residing in that particular area, because every day there's a new person coming in. For that sake, the budget will not be enough to cater for everyone. Then also, electricity supply will be under pressure, and also water supply will be a problem. There will be more informal settlement being created in those big cities, caused by the fact that there is high level of urbanization. People leave their rural areas to urban areas because in rural areas there is a lower level of development. There are no economic opportunities. So it is very important for the regional development that I will be talking about to come on board to improve all regions, especially in rural areas, so that people won't be moving from their normal areas to urban areas for better opportunities. The opportunities must be all over the country, so that there will be no overpopulation in some big cities. Urbanization results in an increase in population numbers in cities and towns. It's an important indicator used by the government to determine the increasing demand for services such as water, housing, and infrastructure. Urbanization happens because rural areas have less economic opportunities. There are no job opportunities available. It is also caused by less development in rural areas. So remember, people want to live better lives. So if ever they are trapped in rural areas where there's no development, they decide to move and find themselves places in the urban areas where there are better opportunities, where there's a better development, so that they can earn the better standard of living. South Africa is experiencing a rapid urbanization. The rate at which people move from rural areas to urban areas is very, very high because there's a lower development. The rapid urbanization has resulted to insufficient services in urban areas because of increase in population growth. So there's more population, so you'll find that the budget is not enough to allocate service to everyone, because every now and then there are new people that are moving to urban areas for better opportunities. Even job opportunities cannot be highly created. They cannot be enough because of the overpopulation in big cities, while we are faced by industries that can produce at the lower capacity. The informal sectors have increased because of inability of the government to build houses for all citizens, due to the fact that there is a budget constraint. At the same time, you find that the new house has been provided to people, and then they hand over their informal settlements to other people, which will result to the informal settlement not even decreasing in South Africa for that reason. So international standardization. So economic and social indicators are also important. Also important that international organizations have specifications on how to compile them. Benefits from international aid and funding organization might not be given if these indicators are not available on international platforms. So these organizations such as United Nations, World Bank, and including IMF, they need to really obtain these indicators so that they will be able to assess countries that are in need, so that there can be a development. The following are three most important international organizations involved in standardization: IMF, the World Bank, as well as United Nations or UN. So South Africa must comply when providing its indicators to benchmark for these three organizations, so that it will be able to get funding when necessary from these organizations. Then we move to industrial development. So under industrial development, remember, we refer to this the policies that aim at improving or expanding existing businesses while enforcing establishment of new industries. That's an industrial development. Why we have industrial development? To create job opportunities, diversifying economy so that there will be variety of goods produced, increasing export so that there will be more goods produced locally and sold abroad, then the country can be competitive abroad, attracting the foreign direct investments, and then also macroeconomic stability. These are reasons for industrial development. So policies, we talk about National Industrial Policy Framework, NIPF, which was formed in 2007. So it was formed to ensure that there's a diversification of the economy to increase exports to the global markets, intensifying industrialization in the long run, and then the promotion of labor-intensive industrialization approach and labor absorption, and then promote economic participation of former marginalized or neglected people areas. So, in certain areas. So ensuring that these people are getting first-hand opportunities when it comes to economy because they were neglected. So these are some aims or objectives of what we call National Industrial Policy Framework. Then we talk about the Industrial Policy Action Plan, which is IPAP. So it aimed at bringing structural changes to South African economy, also improve in the industries that are critical for South Africa to succeed, and also address the decline in South Africa manufacturing capacity, reduce unemployment in South Africa. These are some of the aims. Improve industries focusing on green and energy, saving industries, and agro processing. These are some objectives of IPAP, which is Industrial Policy Action Plan. Then we talk about two strategies also, which is NRDS, National Research Development Strategy. So the strategies are, aimed as follows: focus on using science and technology to promote expansion of industrialization, with special focus on biotechnology and information technology. So this one mainly focus on improving technology so that there will be a variety of goods produced in South Africa using that high level of technology for the sake of economic growth in the country. IMS, Integrated Manufacturing Strategy. This one aims at the following. It aims at it focuses on improving competitiveness of manufacturing sector, ensuring that our manufacturing sector is very much competitive locally and abroad. Also involve cross-cutting issues by examining factors like infrastructure, technology, and innovation, as well as human resources, so ensuring that people are well-trained and skilled enough for them to be productive citizens. And then regional development. Remember, if we talk of regional development, refer to the development policies aimed at improving economic livelihood of less developed areas or regions. That's a regional development. So it aims to close existing gap between big cities and small towns, which are normally located in rural communities. Like I spoke about that when we spoke about urbanization. So if ever we can have regional development, all regions can be developed, so there will be no need for urbanization. So this regional development is there to ensure that there is a decentralization, economic activities are spread across the country to ensure that all citizens can benefit in their regions through economy. If governments are responsible for developing their own regions, economic, social inequalities can be reduced. Wide gap in terms of development between cities and rural communities has resulted to massive urbanization, so that should be reduced. Then we talk about South African handovers or approaches to regional development. We talk about Special Development Initiative, SDIs, Industrial Development Zone, IDZ, Special Economic Zone, SEZ, as well as the corridors. So remember, this and essay, it will be discussed in detail if ever it comes in Section C, or it can come as a part of the Section B, also even Section A. We saw in your today's SPA, we came across Special Economic Zones in your examination. So Special Development Initiative, SDIs. Remember, in this situation, we talk about the point that promote sustainable industrial development in areas where poverty and unemployment is at the highest rate. So it focuses on developing or on improving economic livelihood in underdeveloped areas where there's a high level of unemployment and poverty. That one is a special economic development zone. Remember, spatial is an area development initiative. So initiative in this situation will be installed in the particular community or area or region to develop that particular area. So special development initiatives, SDIs, and attract infrastructure development and investment in underdeveloped areas. So it focuses on ensuring that there's huge infrastructure development in underdeveloped areas or regions. So the main objective is to stimulate economic growth and employment in those regions so that people can have better and improved standard of living. We continue. this program makes provision of public-private partnerships. So in this situation, we come across triple Ps, whereby the government work in hand with the private sector to serve the nation or those communities, to take advantage of economic potential of underdeveloped areas. So triple Ps or public-private partnership refer to project where the state provide infrastructure and private sector provide capital to establish the business venture. So in this situation, that's when the government will provide funding for infrastructure development, and then the business will come on board and get the funding in a form of tendership and improve that infrastructure, bringing its own capital to produce or to improve that particular infrastructure. Then we talk about the corridors. The corridors refer to the tract of land that forms the passageway that allow the access from one point to another. So we have two types of corridors, which are corridors within the country and corridors beyond the borders of the country. So corridors in South Africa are special areas that offer specific advantage to mining, manufacturing, and other businesses. The advantages of also include presence of existing infrastructure and the specialization of products or services. These corridors are developed, are development areas within South Africa and are the development priorities of all development agencies. And then the Department of Trade and Industry provides, helps or support the development of corridors, e.g. Maputo Development Corridor, that start in Gauteng and extend through Mpumalanga to the Maputo port, offers opportunity to the transport industry. And then we continue. So the SDIs and corridors in South Africa, we have KwaZulu-Natal SDI, Wild Coast SDI, Fish River SDI, West Coast Investment Initiative, Coast to Coast SDI, and then this one in KwaZulu-Natal focus on industrial, Wild Coast agri-tourism, and then Fish River focus on industrial, and then West Coast Investment focus on industrial and agri-processing, and then Coast to Coast Corridor focus on transport and tourism. Then we continue. SDIs and corridors, Platinum SDI, which is mining and agritourism, Palaporwa SDI, industrial and agritourism, Maputo Development Corridor, industrial and agri-processing, Lubombo SDI, agritourism, Richards Bay Initiative, mining, industrial and agri-processing. So these are the examples of corridors and SDIs currently in place in South Africa. I'm not going to list them because of time. And then industrial development zones, ITZ. Remember, we call this one the purposely built industrial estate that are physical enclosed to seaports and airports. So in this situation, we are referring to those zones that will be well developed with the proper infrastructure to attract industries to come and invest around them. And investing within the ITZ will attract mostly exporting businesses, as they're attracted also by the duty-free import, meaning they don't pay import tariffs as they're located nearby the ITZs. Businesses are encouraged to open ITZs by offering improved tax rates or incentives. So ITZs currently in place in South Africa, we talk about the KUKA, which focus on steel and auto components or automotive, Tambo International Airport, high-tech industries, East London, which it focused on vehicles, which is automotive industry, Saldanha Bay, it focused on steel, Richards Bay metals, it focused on metals, Mahikeng is agro processing. These are ITs that are currently in place in South Africa. So we continue. So shortcomings of industrial development zones or challenges. Which are the challenges? Inability to attract more foreign investors. So it finds it difficult to ensure that it attract more foreign direct investors, as much as we have some incentive that are extended to those businesses that are investing around ITZ. The absence of special incentive for zones for zone investors, making them unattractive. So there are less investment that are given. Remember, it's mainly duty-free incentive and the proper infrastructure for exporters. Other than that, there are no much incentive compared to what we call special economic zones, restricted to an international port or airport. And then focus on exports only does not mainly attract business that are based on producing for local economy. It attracts business that should produce to sell goods to the foreign markets. Lack of supporting industry skills and infrastructure. continued shortcomings, inability to create more sustainable employment opportunities. It is failing to create more job opportunities, exclusive government ownership and management with no private sector involvement, which differ from international practice, absence of comprehensive framework and strategic planning and guidance. And then also the operation cost of running this in a substantial items that cannot be recovered by rental income. Then we move to number 3, which is the special economic zone. Remember, these are geographical areas that have been set aside to perform specific economic activities. So we call them special economic zones. So they are areas where special economic activities have been identified to be developed there. And then these areas may enjoy incentives such as tax relief, support system to promote industrial development. So there are many incentives under SEZ compared to the incentive given to ITZ. Incentives under SEZ include the what we call tax reductions, other incentives, some subsidies, business intelligence, free advisory schemes, skill support program, etc. So in that situation, they have more incentive compared to ITZ. That's why we consider SEZ as an improvement of existing ITZ. Remember, SEZ attract both the local-based and foreign-based businesses, exporters, and those that are producing for the local-based consumers. They are also attracted. Even SMMEs are attracted to invest in SEZ, compared to ITZ, where we come across only exporting businesses must invest in them. So create the basis for broader range of industrial parks and provides economic infrastructure to enable the effective clustering of value, aiding and employment of enhancing what we call manufacturers. So there is so much there are so much incentives awarded or given to businesses under SEZ than those that are investing in the what we call the ITZ. Aims of SEZ: promote rapid development by acting as magnet for investment, meaning to attract more investors into those areas, enable the development of new industrial regions through establishment of new industrial hubs in underdeveloped regions and strengthening the existing ones. So meaning attracting establishment of new industries and also developing those existing industries within the economy. SEZ are used for the purpose of such as export promotion, enterprise development, urban renewal, rural development, and also domestic or regional production, attracting businesses locally to develop themselves and produce goods for themselves within their own regions. Those are some functions of SEZ. So SEZ can benefit the economy by attracting new businesses or investment through tax incentive, because there are more tax incentives or benefit given to those businesses. Assisting businesses that establish new products lines and expanded their operations. So those businesses that are supported by SEZ, then they will be able to improve their product now and then. Then created more employment opportunities to people in the neighborhood or in those areas where SEZs are located, because there will be a variety of goods being produced, because they are aiming also to diversify the economy, increasing productivity and economic growth. Also promoting more effective use of resources, because in this situation with more businesses in our areas, resources can be used effectively. So there can be natural beneficiation or natural resources beneficiation, because now our businesses locally will be able to convert or transform those natural resources to final goods. Focusing on both domestic and export. So remember, SEZ focus on both, unlike ITZ. SEZ focus on both local producing and also those that are producing for the foreign market. So incentive to promote industrial development in South Africa include the following: the small and micro-medium development program, SMEDP, which offers cash incentive to small medium-sized businesses with assets which are less than 100 million. That specializes in production of goods and services, including manufacturing, food processing, as well as tourism and recycling. And then the second one is CEDA Technology, which is STP. STP is a division of CEDA, Small Enterprise Development Agency, focusing on technology services and support to small businesses. Skill Support Program, SSSP, and then offers financial incentive in a form of cash or grant up to 50% of the cost of training new staff, resulting to expansion of the new projects. And then we move further to critical infrastructure project. or facilities. Then in the state, this is one is designed to improve critical infrastructure such as roads, electricity, and water. Remember, for the infrastructure to be critical, that means no economic activity can go on, no project can continue without availability of that infrastructure. Then it is deemed to be critical. And then the grant covers qualifying development costs from a minimum of 10% to maximum of 30% towards the total development cost of qualifying infrastructure. Duty-free incentives. So in this situation, we talk about having to give those businesses that are investing in ITZ an incentive of not paying import duties or import as they import their capital goods. Companies can import equipment or raw material without having to pay import duties, aims to the international competitiveness of local export industries and attract the foreign direct investments. We continue. FIG, the Foreign Investment Grant. This one focuses on ensuring that it provides incentive to attract the foreign investors or FDIs to come and invest in South Africa. So the foreign entrepreneurs is compensated for qualifying costs of moving new machinery or equipment from abroad, which exclude vehicles. So FIG covers up to 15% of the cost of new machinery and equipment up to maximum of 3 million. So these businesses that are coming from other countries to South Africa will, when they move their material such as equipment and machinery, they will then be given this a foreign investment grant, which starts from 15% up to the 3 million, but it does not include the movement of vehicles from one country to another. And then we talk about business processing services, BPO. This incentive aims to creating job opportunity through offshore activities and attract investments. It pays up to the grant calculated up to 124,000 per job created by the business processing operation located in South Africa. It has created about 6,000 jobs and attracted about 303 million indirect investments into the country. And then a strategic investment program, which is SIP. SIP incentive makes additional industrial investment allowance available to projects in manufacturing, information technology, and research and development. So it focuses on ensuring that it provides extra funding in these three: manufacturing, information technology, research and development fields. The main aim was to attract investment from local and foreign entrepreneurs to contribute to the growth, development, and competitiveness of manufacturing, meaning trying to ensure that our businesses are becoming more competitive in manufacturing, in computer and research and development fields. And then we move to the best practice of regional benchmark. Remember, it is very important for you to ensure that you are able to briefly discuss those that have been discussed about, which are what we call incentive to promote industrial development. So best practice of regional benchmark focus on the following. We have eight of them in this presentation. Free market orientation, which focus on that there must be minimized government intervention into the market so that market will be able to allocate resources efficiently. Competitiveness, meaning establishments of region must not seek for ongoing financial support from the government. They must be able to stand by themselves without knocking on the government for bailout or financial support. And then sustainability, we say each region must be able to sustain its own development without having to seek for the provincial government or national government to support them. Good governance, we're talking about the government that is free of corruption, that would push the principle of transparency and accountability. So meaning public funds must be used efficiently. And then we talk about also provision of resources. In this region, we talk about adequate resources such as infrastructure must be made available to ensure that there's improvement of economic activities within the region. So regions must be responsible to provide these resources for themselves within their own regions. Investment in human and social capital. In this region, we mean local governments must be able to improve the skills of their own people so that opportunities that are prevailing in the regions will be taken by those people. Then that will allow the region to develop even further. So there must be investment in human and social capital. Integration. So in this situation, we mean the benefits by one region must be able to spill over to another region. For instance, if one region is doing very well while others are doing bad, they must be able to cooperate and learn from each other. That one is known as an integration. Partnerships. In this situation, we mean the public-private partnership must be created between the government, NPOs, NGOs, civil societies, so that there will be improvement of development within the region. So if ever they work together in partnership, there will be accelerated growth and development in our regions. And then, after all, our lesson ends here, and we are indeed on time. I thank you, and I believe this lesson will assist you as you prepare for your preparatory examination. Remember, this lesson has covered about 3 essays, which is economic indicators, social indicators, as well as South African handovers to regional development. So it is very important for you to ensure that you play along so that you will be able to knock down your economic pursuits in your term 3 preparatory examination. I thank you. Our next session will be on contemporary economic issues. Basically, we'll be focusing on inflation. Meet you next week Friday. Thank you.